Welcome to Making Your Miles Count podcast, and this particular podcast is talking about technology and the independent operator industry, where the technology is leading the entire independent operator industry and how it's going to affect you as an independent operator, as a driver. How can you foresee you're going to be doing everything from your taxes to managing your truck, and what's it going to look like, say, 5 or 10 years from now?
Welcome to Making Your Miles Count production, an educational program to all Canadian lease owner-operators with your host, Robert Scaper.
Welcome to Making Your Miles Count podcast. I'd like to introduce my co-hosts today. They're actually, most of our technology department is sitting right here in my office here. Mike and Shane and Roland, and they are, you can say hi if you like. Go ahead. Hi, there you go. And we have had many discussions in the office about technology, where it's going and what we're building as a firm, Making Your Miles Count. And actually, when it really comes down to it, a lot of people believe, and we promote it as Making Your Miles Count is an accounting firm, which is true, but it's almost equal that you could also say that Making Your Miles Count is a software developing company. And so that means we do an awful lot of investing into technology. A very significant portion of our income goes towards it, trying to make it a better experience for our clients and ultimately for the industry. And that is not an easy thing to do. There's a couple of principles I follow through on, or as much as I can, or actually I do. And number one is we develop at the speed of cash. There's a lot of things when it comes to technology and apps that are out there. A lot of investors throw millions and millions of dollars at something to see whether it sticks against the wall. That's not really my business model. I'm not, I don't do that. I only invest in technology as I'm financially capable of doing. So in other words, our business is debt-free, and we live and breathe according to cash flow, basically. Whatever comes in, a lot of it goes towards the building of technology. And the one thing I've noticed as owner of Make Your Miles Count is that technology sometimes takes a significant time frame, especially if you're going at the speed of cash, to actually develop anything at all. Like we can be months and months and months, sometimes years, before all of a sudden some major thing comes out, and it's a major platform that we work with. It has tested my patience, but I think I'm a better person for it, I think. But realistically, technology historically has taken sometimes years and years and even decades to build, and is in a continuous building process. There's no good app that is ever 100% finished, so to speak. We generally assume that software like 80% complete, and then you always have to have a certain amount of people maintaining it and upgrading it and stuff like that. So software is not like what it used to be, canned. You just buy it off the shelf and it's good for 25 years. That just doesn't work out anymore. So we have a fair bit of experience with technology, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about technology as it affects the independent operator industry. We'll go maybe a little bit into history. Mike, you've been actually either accounting or technology. That's your background, right?
Technology.
Technology? Well, you've done some counting.
A little bit.
A little bit, not much. Shane, it's almost all technology.
A lot of technology.
Yeah, a lot of technology.
Yeah.
Roland, you're primarily a truck driver who has got into technology development and doing some of your own projects before you even worked for us and the like. So you got both aspects. Driving. You were a dispatcher for
Correct,
a while.
Yeah.
So you got the company perspective there, and of course I've been a driver, and now I'm the CEO, and I don't even know how to spell IT. Never mind. So you guys can sometimes, when we're talking in a business meeting or IT meeting, you guys start talking in hieroglyphics, and I have no idea what anybody is saying, but I read people's faces, body language, tones of voice, all sorts of things. The rest of it is just goes completely over my head. It's fun, but sometimes it's quite intimidating. I trust you guys a phenomenal amount, and I believe you guys have earned that trust over the years. And so I have a lot of fun in these in our technology meetings, IT meetings. Almost always we have some sort of pizza in there, but it's way more than the pizza. A lot of what we are going to be discussing here today, we've discussed numerous times in tech meetings, and I figured it would be just cool to get it all out in a podcast and help an independent operator. There are a fair bit of operators who are just really into technology, have no problem with it. But there's also a fair bit of operators who want nothing to do with technology at all. And they have their heels firmly stuck in the dirt and being dragged around. And some of them, so there's some people, and we'll talk much later about artificial intelligence and how some people are living in a state of fear and anxiety, and goodness sakes, we want to at least help people alleviate a little bit of their fears in there. But this is our topic for today. And one thing I've been told to do now is, if you enjoy our podcasts, Making Your Miles Count, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps in developing content, and I really appreciate all interaction, ideas, suggestions, even corrections. Corrections is fine too, and I appreciate an open door policy in every way. So subscribe, hit the like button. That helps. Share it with a friend. And what's the other thing that notification?
Turn on your notifications.
Turn on notifications. Yeah. It's amazing what you'll find out. Even though I am president of a quasi kind of a software company, it's amazing how ignorant I am about social media. But that's okay. I'm okay with being ignorant on a lot of things. There's some things I know cold, other things not so much. I do know trucking. I do know my wife and I driving for many years. We actually enjoyed it an awful lot. We actually really like driving. Our first truck was a non-air ride single axle Ford. And back in the days when some of the roads in Ontario sent you right to the top of the bunk because they're such horrible roads or whatever, that's what we survived off. We put one of these air mattresses in our bunk as we were bumping around or whatever. You got these columns in those air mattresses or whatever. They rip right away. It was just a great big balloon in the end. It's like sleeping on a beach ball. I mean, it just tore everything inside. That's how bad the roads were back in the 80s and 90s. Well, I guess it depends. Actually, it really depended on which province you were driving at the time, and it shifts too. Back then, it was I think it was Quebec was the absolute worst. But Ontario wasn't that bad. Now it reverses every couple of decades. They invest and one province gets better than the other and stuff like this. I don't know why. Roads is a different topic maybe, but way back I've talked to truck drivers for many years back. I know one guy who drove at Reimers, and Reimers at the time when they bought trucks, they didn't even put radios in the trucks. So you had no way from even a communication perspective. You're driving at Reimers back in the 70s, 80s. You don't even have a radio in there. If there was a CB, it was your own CB, and you had to do your own hooking up. And sometimes they didn't even allow that. So I know one driver who bought these little tiny transistor radios, with a 9-volt battery in there and a long antenna, and he'd hang the antenna out of the window, roll it all up, and listen to it. Try and squeeze out a conversation or music or something like that out of these little tiny transistor radios that Japan used to make. That's pretty much the start of technology or the moving in there. I mean, there was a lot of trucks that, had AM radios, and then they had AM FM radios. FM was a big jump. There was, everything was all AM, and all of a sudden, we got an AM FM radio. There's technology sort of leapt, and it was, but the leaps back then was actually a little bit hilarious looking back at. So there was radio programs, but the problem with being a truck driver is using a radio, especially a long distance truck driver. You get into the signal and you listen to it for 2, 3, 4 hours, and then it slowly fades out, and you only had a small window, and then you'd have to find another station and stuff like that. So technology back then, it was very hit and miss, kind of like, but you had a very, very isolated life in the truck. You're just like, you can't speak to anybody. There was no such thing as cell phones, and you just were extremely isolated. What changed a lot was if a person had a CB radio, and that was a huge, huge factor. The CB radio, I remember when I was a kid, probably 8, 9 years of age, so this is late 60s, early 70s, and I was in a parking lot with a friend who had, his father had a CB radio in his van. So we went in and we thought, oh, this is cool. You could talk to other people on the other side of town, and see what happens. So we would use it, and we'd talk, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And all of a sudden, thunder over the speaker said, all right, boys, this is a serious piece of equipment here. It's not really designed to play with, and it's like, God was speaking or something like this. Oh, this is cool. And we took off and we didn't use it. But back then it was a very highly respected piece of equipment that was used under certain circumstances, under certain rules that governed it. And basically, the different carriers had different channels, but the open one to the open, everyone was channel 19, I guess, was everybody's. But different carriers, of course, had different channels, and then they could keep. It was a cool unit, and but the CB radio slowly and then much faster was taken over by extremely harsh smut. It was, you never mind a child being able to use it. You couldn't swear on the CB back in the 70s, 80s. They threatened people to take away their CB if they misused it. But now today, you have unfathomable crap on the CB, and that's why a lot of guys have just abandoned it. Now, probably around the mid 2000 to say 2010, it started coming back a little bit. There's more people using it, sort of like a retro kind of an idea, because it's been so useless for so long. Even some of the smuts sort of not using it anymore, a lot less usage, and so some of it is coming back again.
And hasn't everyone kind of transitioned more to internet services?
Oh yeah,
so
internet.
You would have all these people that were just causing chaos and mayhem. Now they're all on the internet. They're on YouTube.
Yeah,
they're doing their live streams on Facebook.
Yeah. So it's a neglected thing. So there's I guess a little bit of retro. How do I say this? A lot of the smut left just because nobody was using it anymore, and there's other things for them to do it in. So it's quite the change or whatever. But CB's radios, especially down in the States, is much more deeper states is more used than it is in Canada. Canada is far too big and far too sparse of a place to fully and completely utilize CBs. So,
okay, what's the distance? Like, how far can you communicate with a CB?
It depends on the night, I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can get hundreds of miles.
Okay.
If it's reflecting off the atmosphere or something, I don't know. I'm not sure that much about it, but generally it's about 3 or 4 miles.
Yeah, especially if there's no hills in between. I know sometimes when there's a small convoy or just friends driving together, it's if you're like a mile or two behind, but if there's a hill in between, it
Yeah.
it would cut off.
Yeah.
So if you're driving down the Yellowhead, you're gonna have a lot of time where you're not communicating with anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It can, like, I mean, Yellowhead is flat, straight nothingness, you know,
Yeah.
and so you can do quite, if you're in a convoy, you could do, 6-7 miles apart or whatever, you can do quite a few. But if you say hi and you're crossing and one going east and one going west
Then
or
he's
whatever,
gone.
you got about 30 seconds or
Yeah.
40 seconds before you're out of it, So it's quite, it's a unique feature. There's some people who really love it, but most have shied away from it.
Yeah, because when I started driving, I know some people told me don't even turn it on. Like, this was in 2012 when I started, and I didn't even turn it on. Like, only in recent years, once in a while, it's like if there's an accident or something, I wanted to get some up-to-date information, I would turn it on. But other than that, first of all, there's a lot of junk on there.
Oh yeah, it's
people
it's
swearing at the drivers and
unbelievable.
whatnot. There's whatever. Most of the time, I just had it turned off completely.
Yeah, it's. But it was in its time, it was very useful. It was a critical piece of equipment for some truck drivers. Very, very cool. Then there's a big leap to cell phones, and I don't know if I remember those box Motorola things, giant things, like they were huge. And I mean, I had one, but the cost was astronomical. And it's not necessarily even the original upfront costs of the phone itself, as much as it was the phone plans were disastrous. I had some clients, even 25 years ago, which would be in the 90s, they had $1,000, $1,200 a month bills consistently. I had one guy, $3,200 or $3,600 phone bills. The only way I could see that he could actually run up that high is the guy must have been on there 8 hours a day just talking to somebody.
And that was just talking, right?
Just talking.
That was before, everyone was texting and using data 24/7.
It was a great invention, but unbelievably expensive. Just it had to be used very, very sparingly. That was something that the technology has increased phenomenally when it comes to cell phones. Obviously, the ones we have right now are just light years ahead of what was in the 80s and 90s for sure.
Well, it's not just light years ahead of the cell phone technology. It's light years ahead of stuff that NASA was using.
Yeah, exactly.
Because your phone has more power than the computers NASA used to send people to the moon.
Yeah, it's just amazing the difference. It somewhat opened up the truck driver to a little bit more social. The cell phone. At least he felt, well, okay, worst case scenario, I can call for help if I'm in a situation, or call for social. I know I'm feeling something, maybe I should talk to my wife or something like that. You actually have that sort of emergency kind of usage there, and you don't feel nearly as isolated as before.
And all the dispatches, I mean, they all come through email now. I mean, the company I was working at, it was all through phone. People without, when I started, there were a few drivers that didn't even have data, and it was very difficult to get the dispatches out to them because we were using email. But I think the majority all had data on.
Back in the 90s or so, they started coming out with satellites in the truck, and they did a lot of the communication through that. And sometimes they'd track the truckers and stuff like this. Some guys didn't like the idea of being tracked, and so they'd put tinfoil over the dome and stuff like this, and all the different ways to get feeling a little bit more independent and which I mean I respect that for that reason. But now they have cell phones, and anybody can see it. If you have an Apple and your wife, she can know where you are within 3 feet, no matter where you are in North America. So a lot has changed technology wise, but also everything from privacy and stuff like that. But the communication with the driver back even in the 90s was all through, a lot of it was through the dome, like the satellite unit in the truck itself. Slowly and bit by bit, a little bit by one carrier does it, and sort of it catches on, is they'll give you whatever, $50 or $100 a month if you have your own cell phone, back when cell phones started to get economical. And so built in the contract with an independent operator is you may get, or even a driver for that matter, you get $100 for your cell phone, and then they can actually contact you directly, and like that's between the carrier and the driver, and increasing the more and more accessibility and the viability financially of a cell phone as it grew through the generations of phones. It became way more cost effective.
So what did they do in the 60s and 70s back before cell phones and before some of these guys even had CB radios?
You had to know where the phone was at the truck stop or okay,
so
I know in 20 minutes from now.
The driver's responsibility then to, when he would stop, to pick up the phone and then call back to his company to figure out, okay, what's he supposed to do, where he's going.
Yeah. Or maybe there's a delay or there's something or how to get to where you're going, that kind of thing.
I remember that, and I'm told this, of course, but that they had to check in every day. Like in the morning, they would the truck stop just quickly call in and say where they were. That's how the dispatch actually tracked where the truck was and where the load was.
Yeah, just by calling in, they had an 800 number. The carrier, and of course, I mean, a lot has changed. Like now, and then they tracked people. Then they didn't have to look over the shoulder, that kind of thing. So a lot of significant changes in there. But we have become much more dependent on these actual little cell phones in our hands, and rightfully so. It actually produces a lot of productivity in people when there's much more communication. Everybody says, "Oh, there's miscommunication." Yeah, you have no idea what miscommunication is unless you go back into the 60s and 70s.
At least there is communication.
There is communication.
Yeah,
it's better to sometimes have miscommunication. Or a little bit of miscommunication than have nothing at all. Some people would disappear for 5 days at a time back, and whether they're going to get the load there on time, nobody knows. But there was a lot of differences, and it's psychological. Probably, in my opinion, psychologically, it is that communication with society and your cell phone that has the biggest effect, where drivers no longer feel isolated. Whereas before it was brutal, and not just, and now we're getting a little bit further ahead, but it's not just verbally talking to somebody. It's also being able to see them on the phone, and you can FaceTime them or whatever, real time, or that makes a huge difference inside you. Now, 98% of the time I drove with my wife, so it wasn't that isolated for me. But I can see, I've seen a lot of truck drivers who kind of lose their marbles a little bit because of the isolation. There's other things that have countered that. For instance, we were talking about radios, AM, FM radios. Then came Sirius XM, and now you can listen to programs for 8-10 hours at a time, no matter where you are, whether you're in Newfoundland or Vancouver.
And you have choice, right?
And you have choice.
Because before you might have, depending on where you were, you might have only had 3 radio stations.
You had one.
Good luck finding something you're interested in.
Yeah, exactly. Much more freedom, and you feel a little bit more connection to society. It has really changed the emotional impact of this psychology of a long-distance truck driver. Now, I have some clients who they hardly know how to text. One guy said, my thumbs are so big I don't text, and do you call me or don't bother anything else. Okay, fine. But I mean, there are some people who have their heels dug in the dirt, and I do respect people who shy away from technology because it is invasive into your routine, and some people value their routine. Not just physically, but also mentally too. They don't like to be interrupted, kind of a thing, and it gives them more security, I guess. When they have more, they can finish a thought or finish a sentence without being getting interrupted by their phone, kind of a thing, and that's a big thing. There is a little bit of backlash now. They're coming out a little bit retro there. The flip phones are actually coming back in, or phones that have only 1 or 2 or 3 apps that you can put onto them or whatever, because people are rebelling against this inundation of information and way too many.
Well, and you have to look at how far the technology has come in such a short amount of time.
It might be too far.
Well, especially if you look at people that they started out, and again, there's no phones, there's no instant connection, and now they might be against having all these apps or texting, as you said, but they still have the phone in their pocket. You can call them whenever you want.
Yeah.
So they have gone a long way already.
Yeah. How technology has affected the driver, it's quite a bit. Like, it is quite a bit. Like Sirius XM made a big difference, but probably since about 2003 to 2015, the introduction of podcasts becoming much more prevalent. I know one of the reasons why we're doing podcasts right now is I was going to write my 3rd book. I decided, you know what? It's more helpful to the drivers to do podcasts than it is for me to write a book. I could write a book and say, hey, look, I've written 3 books now, not 2. But that was maybe ego or something like that. Say, oh, I could get it on paper. Well, so for you people who ever read paper anymore, it's a little bit ridiculous. It may take a while for me to fully get comfortable with a podcast, but it's my 3rd book, and it may be 5 years worth of.
And if you look at it from the driver's perspective, I mean, he's busy. He can't really read while he's driving, right?
Yeah.
But now he has a way to listen and to learn while driving. Yeah. And so you can do 2 things at once.
Yeah. That's true. There's another thing about technology. We didn't talk about this, and that is books. You can now read and listen to books.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I did.
That is a phenomenal benefit. I mean, you compare that to the guys in the 70s and 80s who had to read books or something like that and had total isolation. Now books, man, you can read probably easily a book a day, probably, if you really wanted to.
Yeah, that's what because it's Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, you can. And what I've learned, you can actually speed the thing up so that it's 1.2 or 1.5, depending on what program or book you're reading, and you can get just as much out of it. Sometimes even more if it's sped up, because our brain thinks so much faster than otherwise. Maybe somebody's speeding this podcast up. Who knows? but realistically, it's there's so much features that you can have. You're not nearly as isolated as was before. Now you have podcasts, and actually podcasts are taking over even Sirius XM stuff. There's I used to know. I'd probably say a huge percentage of truck drivers used to have Sirius XM. They don't actually have it anymore. Now they just have a little, either an iPod or iPad or a laptop or whatever on their passenger seat or whatever, and they're listening it while they're driving through a podcast. And sometimes even if they don't get any reception, they can download stuff and they can keep on listening. Mm-hmm. And the availability is just amazing. And anyway, that's pretty much some of the historical communication aspects of it. I was actually looking for my master's thesis the other day, and it's a big binder here. I couldn't find it here in my office. I probably put it into one of my storage bins or whatever. But in my master's thesis, which was completed in 1996, I did it on the trucking industry. And there was a section in it on technology. And at the time, in 1996, I talked about paperwork where bills of lading would be electronically signed, electronically processed, all the way through. So it's basically paperless for the trucking company all the way around, so it's electronically deposited into their account. And that was a small section of my master's thesis. Now, in 1996, that presentation was cutting edge. It was right at the tip of the spear. There was individuals in the trucking industry that asked, could I copy, this section and stuff like this? And I say, yeah, sure, whatever, And some of the things that I described in there was a little bit further out than even was, and shouldn't say possible, but it was extremely expensive to do it at the time. I was doing some consulting with a carrier. Believe it was in 1998, if I remember right. And the president or COO or whatever he was, he said, you know what? He says, we actually got basically all of this implemented in our carrier. And he was extremely proud, And he says, but there's a problem. And I said, what's the problem? He says, the shippers or receivers were not satisfied with a digital copy of a person's signature. They wanted the actual ink on paper, and that's what they wanted to file away. So it's not that the technology couldn't do it. It was actual people making choices saying, no, we're not going to take it. And he says, otherwise, it's totally workable, and it phenomenally reduces costs and problems and all sorts of things. Another side feature of that, the legal industry and even Canada Revenue Agency, for that matter, was not prepared for the technology. The legal industry said, well, what's this digital? You can reproduce it anytime or whatever, and blah, blah. That was their argument. And maybe at the time, you could falsify things digitally. Nowadays, it's very difficult to falsify things without there being some sort of a print, because there's too many overlays of information in there. And courts have recognized that digital has sometimes more evidence associated with it than the old ink on paper does. The legal industry back in the 90s didn't know how to handle digital, whereas now they do. So it's, how do I say, the legal industry, it needed it to catch up to the digital. And there are a lot of things, even digitally now, that the legal industry, it's above their head. And they're always playing catch up. They're always way behind digital. But in their defense, digital moves at the speed of light. So, I mean, goodness sakes, pat them on the back and do your best you can and keep on going,
Well, and with digital, there's not really any obstacles, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to the legal industry, well, you have a lot of obstacles.
Yeah, there's
a lot
checks
of
and balances
things. Yeah.
and verification,
and then there's a whole,
all sorts. Yeah.
The government, right?
They have to write an applicable law.
Yeah. And that takes time, and that
Yeah.
slows everything down.
You have to think it through. Some of the legislation that were written for digital was pretty much useless. Like it went way down cow paths.
Or the recent example would be the Digital News Act that was just passed. That requires social media companies to pay legacy media for sharing links.
Oh.
And so now here, the issue with this is that that's not how the internet works. You don't pay someone to share your links. You're happy when someone shares your links.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have to pay you for it.
That was the legislation, but wasn't there a backlash with it?
Yeah, the backlash
we're not sharing anything.
Is that we're just not going to share your stuff. And so now the people that lobbied for this obviously didn't understand the potential consequences.
Yeah, and so realistically, that has isolated Canada, because we don't have the rest of the world has access to information, and we are severely or significantly restricted.
Yeah,
that's going backwards. But
it's an example of the legislation being at odds with the technology, and what we see here is that the technology is going to end up winning.
Yeah, and you know what? All it takes is one new political party in there who says, "I don't think that was the right," and whoosh, it all goes the way of I always call it the long gun registry. They put all this money, this effort, all the long gun registry, and then it was push for 6, 7, 8 years, and whatever. A new guy comes, wham! It's all gone, everything, and they bleach bit or whatever it is. They take everything out of the record and start right from scratch, and everybody goes, so much for millions of dollars and all sorts of headaches or whatever. This is what happens in Canada. We got this political thing going back and forth. Let's not get into politics, but realistically, unless we want to be a complete isolated Cuba, we better get along with technology. And I'm not talking just big tech and stuff like that, but technology growth in and of itself. Just make it realistic and open. But anyway, my thesis, the main thing I learned from it, not just the technology and bringing it out, was that it has to have people, everybody being accepting of it. And I was talking to, was it you or somebody? Somebody was talking. I was talking to who prior to COVID, people still were not accepting digital stuff. All of a sudden, COVID came in, and everything went digital, and suddenly everybody accepted. It was actually my brother who said everybody was now accepting digital. And so it flew at the border, it flew it from shipper, receiver, company care, everything was working fine. Then COVID passes by and it goes back, and we say, okay, now we're all going to be digital again. Nope. They said now we're going back to the original ink on paper again. Well, that's a personal or a human choice and decision to do that. And you can have that experience any place in technology. We'll later talk about AI. And in the end, it comes down to if people aren't going to accept, some of this stuff is just going to go away. Mm-hmm. I mean, who cares what the risks factors? If everybody drops it, it's going nowhere. And maybe that's an extreme kind of a position on it. But realistically, technology requires people to accept it. If it doesn't accept it, it's going nowhere. So collectively, it has to have a value that's associated with it. There are other things that technology has affected the driver. And probably one of the biggest ones that I'm ticked off at the most, because I had never actually utilized it, is we used maps. Physical boxes. I had box of maps and pulling out this city and that city. Now we have GPS. And GPS not to within a couple of blocks, but goodness sakes, somebody can send you a ping and you can be within 6 inches from wherever the guy pinged you. I mean, it is that simple. Navigation, GPS has changed navigation for a truck driver. If that one technology was pulled, there would be so many truck drivers who would be lost, literally, figuratively, than any other technology. And it makes a huge difference in productivity. I would say depends on how long of a trip that you're doing, of course, and how often you've gone that direction or so. If you're freeboarding, you're going all over the place, GPS is a huge benefit for it. But if you're on a scheduled run, of course, it helps absolutely nothing almost sometimes. But if you're freeboarding, going all over the place, it can make hours and hours difference in a day. It can make sometimes days difference in a long trip, because sometimes you get there half an hour before close as opposed to the next morning, and it can make that big of a difference. So the productivity is a huge advantage for using GPS.
Yeah. And
it's amazing the amount of confusion and conflict that GPS in and of itself avoids. If you just sit down and think through everything that it helps you on a daily basis, it's ridiculous.
I was sitting inside Pizza Hut one time, and the internet was down. And I was listening to their conversations. People would call in and order pizza, and the person on the phone would have to ask for directions.
Oh, no.
Because the internet was down. These people had no idea where anything was.
Yeah.
And so they were having to take directions, write them down on a piece of paper so they could deliver these pizzas, because they had no idea where to go without the internet.
Yeah. Do you remember directions from people? You call the shipper or the receiver or whatever, and and then you go down, and then you hit and then you see a great big tree, and you make a left, and then you take over there. There's a little shed over there, and you take a right, and then you take some of the directions you got is just like, I never, but 50% of the time you're in the middle of a cornfield before you get to
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. And some of it was hilarious. You talk to other truck drivers and they go, that guy didn't have a clue of how to do it. The guys would tell him to come on in, and it'd be a low bridge or something like that. It's like nowadays with GPS, it can tell you whether it's a low bridge or not.
Yeah, if you have the trucker GPS,
Yeah.
it can tell you that.
Yeah, so like it's reduced accidents, all sorts of conflicts and stuff like that. Just amazing, the technology and the safety and stuff like that it comes to. It's just great.
Well, and just the time savings, because you don't have to ask someone to describe where this place is.
You don't have to slow down.
Yeah.
You don't have to stop to make a phone call or anything like that. It's just amazing. Just amazing. Now, ELDs is a little bit of a controversy because it's actually quite recent. Probably only in the last few years has ELD been mandated, and the heels in the dirt for the average individual was quite significant. And sometimes there is still heels in the dirt. Like my brother, for instance, he has a 1999 Freightliner. So it is he legally can drive with a paper log. He doesn't need a otherwise. There is some loss of productivity from ELD that you can't say that it didn't affect. If all you ever evaluate is these guys on a scheduled run or something, of course it doesn't affect your performance then. But if you're freeboarding, if you're going here, there, and everywhere, and you got short little deadlines, and if you make it there half an hour sooner, you're a whole day ahead. It makes sometimes a huge difference. Mandating ELDs might be realistic, but it has dropped productivity, and it's on the backs and shoulders of the driver itself. Now, you made a good point the other day. Just pull your mic up a little here, but from the company's perspective, you mentioned.
Oh yeah, I remember I was in the office when we switched to ELDs, and of course as a driver I always embraced it, but there were some drivers that absolutely basically refused to do it until they at this point it's like
had no choice.
Yeah, no choice. Yeah, but the funny thing is now after a couple of years, I don't think there's any single driver that I know of that would actually want to go back to paper log. I mean, I remember when my ELD, it's when they switched from 3G to 4G, and I had a couple of days without E-log when I was in the US. And I just remember the work you had to go through on paper and drawing, and I'm like, I haven't written in a long time. and
going back is not going to be easy, if not, shouldn't say impossible, but Now you made another effect. The average temperament of the driver.
Oh yeah, the drivers they're overall a lot more arrested because often what you would do is where I worked we went to Laredo a lot.
Yeah.
And you can with an e-log it takes you almost 3 days, 2 days and a bit. But with paper log you would delay going out and then you would drive it do it in 2 days. And drivers were always exhausted on the road and they were always tired and for those that wanted to drive a lot more than even paper log allowed, they were always exhausted and tired because they always wanted that one extra hour more or mile more. And now we had a lot less problems with drivers being upset or angry on the road for the tiniest things. That they were a lot more arrested. So
So I guess in a large company we have a lot of dispatchers. The amount of complaining and bickering and stuff like that probably dropped, or at least it was in your experience. Yeah. And I can see that too. I mean, fatigue is probably one of the biggest factors in bickering factors in there. So ELDs is a big factor, and so that reduced productivity, but it brought a much more of a more mature attitude, possibly in some cases.
Yeah, and it made planning easier too, and predicting loads and stuff like that.
From the carrier's perspective, much more. I know a couple of guys who they grew up on the farm, so by the time they're 55, 60 years, 50, 60 years of age, somewhere in there, if they get more than 4 hours sleep in a night, they must be sick or something like that, because they're 4 to 5 hours, that's it. And so when they suddenly have to shut down for 10 hours or something like that, what the heck do they do for the other 4 hours? So they hate it from that perspective. And then when it comes time now, okay, now I'm driving. Now I'm starting to get a little tired already. It doesn't coincide with the cycle of the individual. And there are some individuals. Like I know one guy I'm thinking about specifically who grew up on the farm. He woke up at 3:30, 4 o'clock every day. And back when he had paper logs, he woke up 3:30, 4 o'clock, bam. He had things done before noon, and half the guys aren't even up by then, And so he had huge productivity. And so when ELD came in, it was really hard on him. His physical body actually had to adjust, and it still doesn't work very well for him. I don't know whether they'll ever get an exception for it, where they can readjust and say, no, this guy, he's got far too much adrenaline, get him out on the road. It's not a perfect science for sure.
Yeah, and one of the problems with e-logs is if you do, like for myself, I didn't like to get up too early, but if once you get up early and you want to make time, now you're forced to get up early every single day to keep that schedule. It's however you start, that's kind of how you continue the trip, and that's not always a good thing either. So,
yeah, it's because your trip may alter in there, and it changes everything for sure. There's another quick little thing about technology: mechanical versus digital engines. In 1994, and I went through this in another podcast. In 1994, when it switched basically from mechanical to digital, the fuel economy almost universally jumped up about 1 mile per gallon. So it was a huge advantage to have a digital over a mechanical. And that's that productivity, that efficiency is what technology should be done. That's what the impact should be. That would happen in 1994. Starting in 2000 and basically 2000, not 2001, depending on when you point your finger at it, 2001, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, where the technology for pollution control actually did the exact opposite. So the value of a brand new truck, to construct it, actually went up they said about 10 grand for a truck, but the performance of that truck actually went down. Mm-hmm. And owner-operators said, forget it. Why in the world get a new technology when the old stuff is better than the new stuff? And that is that's something technology does have, that inverse effect sometimes, where the technology is actually worse. The new stuff is worse than the old stuff. We'll get to another stuff when we get to Windows, my famous nemesis. But technology should make it more productive, but it doesn't always do that. Some of the things about technology, there's weird stuff that come across. You're old enough, Mike, now we can talk about Y2K. These guys are a little bit too young. But Y2K was a scare that everybody's programming was going to cause a whole bunch of problems. How did they actually, in your opinion, fix it?
I think they just checked. It was a date problem, right? So
yeah.
I think they just had to make sure the chips and everything were compatible with 4-digit dates instead of 2.
Yeah. And was it as big of a problem as it actually was, or not?
Not in the end. I mean,
not in the end, but it
whatever
could have
they
been.
did worked. I mean,
well, it was a predictable problem. They knew it was coming,
and they knew where to look.
Yeah.
The scare was the stuff that they thought they didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think the scare was kind of the same as it is with any other crisis. It's usually the media pumping it up.
Yeah.
From a technology level, it's a problem that's predictable and solvable.
Because I remember they were talking about the computers at dams and bursting, and the power grid and all. So people going out. I had friends, but they still own the same generators. because they felt everything was going to go down, and they had unbelievable amount of bottled water everywhere and stuff like this, and it was a legitimate fear, but it was pumped too much, too high. They felt it affected too much.
And there was also fear of the banking system collapsing now because of this, because of the legacy machinery. And I know some people that went and turned all their cash into gold, so that so that they had it and they were prepared no matter what happened. And hopefully they kept that gold, because it would be worth a lot more now than then.
Yeah, fascinating. Y2K was something really cool to live through, and realistically, there are other things especially from a technology perspective, that shadow the Y2K issue. Not nearly as big and not nearly as pumped up and stuff like this, but there's a lot of things that kind of mirror that. I know when we talk about everything from ransomware to scams to all sorts of things digitally coming in like that, the crooks can do unbelievable amount of stuff that through technology that they were never able to do before. And we have to create a system in our own lives to be basically saying, there's a line that I will draw. One of the greatest lines probably that could ever be drawn for any person is, don't give out any of your personal and financial information over the internet. Never get money in, what do they call those things? Wire transfers and stuff like it, or anything. You don't give out anything to anybody without any kind of verification. Take it slowly, get verification from other sources to make sure that this guy's even saying things that are actually true or not. There's unbelievable. My son was driving truck, and all of a sudden my dad got a phone call saying, "Hey, wait a minute, Jonathan's been arrested, and we got to put up bail." And I'm thinking, wow, what in the world did he get involved with? A little bit scratching my head, and my dad was convinced. Yeah, I heard him. Like, I talked to him for a bit on the phone, and not for long, but for a little bit, And I'm thinking, what in the world? And then we thought, they want us to give this money to her. And I said, okay, wait a minute. This is just a little bit funny, and maybe I'll talk to the local cops who were supposed to have arrested him, And I was totally blindsided. I believed my dad more than if they would have called me, I would have realized it right away. But because it went through my dad and he was so convinced, I went to the police officer, and I went to the dispatch office, and I started explaining it to him, and I looked at his eyes, and I'm going, "Oh, this is not right. This sounds like a scam." And he, smiled or whatever, and I said, "Wait a minute." And all of a sudden I realized I talked to my son yesterday or the night before, and he was in Calgary, and he was not in Manitoba. And I go, dang it, I got suckered into this. Now, it was just my time or whatever, but they are so convincing. They can now take people's voices and make it actually sound like the person that's being held for ransom or whatever. So we have to have some sort of a line and stop, no matter what. Whether it's a phone call, whether it's an internet, whatever it was, there's a certain wall that we have to have. And we say, okay, we're not going past any of this because there's way too many ways in which we can be scammed.
Well,
and that's one of the risks.
There's very easy ways to verify if this is true or not. So if someone calls you saying, hey, we're from the CRA or we're from your bank, and
or from here.
Yeah.
From our firm. Yeah,
exactly.
And we've had that a lot.
And they're claiming that, you need to pay us money. Well, the simple solution is to ask them where they're calling from and then hang up and then actually go get that person's number and call and ask.
Yeah. You don't use the number that they give you.
You go to their official website, you get the number, you call and you ask and say, "Hey, I got a call from so-and-so claiming this. Is this actually true?" Yeah. And then you'll find out right away whether it's actual information and whether you actually need to make a payment or not.
It's amazing. One of the best podcasts I've ever listen to when it comes to scams is what's that guy? He Leonardo DiCaprio played him in a movie. Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
That guy. What's his name now? Whatever his name is. You can look, Google it up or whatever. Google it up. Google it. But he had a 1 hour talk about scams, and he talks an awful lot about two-factor authentication and stuff like this. And realistically, dang it, I can't remember what my point was now. I like that presentation. It's a 1 hour thing. I think he talked to Google or something. Mm-hmm. I think everybody should listen to it. And where the future is going is two-party authentication. Two-party?
Two-factor.
Two-factor. Keep calling it party. Anyway, two-factor authentication. And that's what we do in our firm here now. We're starting to implement some of that stuff. So realistically, from any kind of a financial point of view, Canada Revenue Agency or anything like that, if you would be our client, you don't have to worry about anything. You just call us, and we've had quite a few clients call us and say, hey, I thought I didn't know anything to CRA, but I got this phone call, and it doesn't even get past our receptionist. She goes, hey, nope, it's a scam. Everything's fine. You go look you up, and everything's fine. No problem. That's so there is a lot of things, and we're getting more and more exposure to some of it. Some of it is actually being exposed an awful lot. There's some really cool stuff on YouTube where guys play through and they actually break into the thieves guys' computers and stuff like that. It's really cool. Technology is great until it's vulnerable and can produce problems, no different than Y2K, of course. But I love technology a lot. Let's take this topic of technology and apply it a little bit more directly to the accounting aspect of an independent operator. Historically, an independent operator has to keep all of their receipts and put all of their paperwork, put it into an envelope, drop it off at at wherever their office is, or a lot of people, or some people mailed it, or wherever they were, and they do it on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. Or some guys, back when they were self-employed, they put it all together and it was all done once a year, and everything was done annually. And the like. So the habits of the operator determined when a bookkeeper would receive paperwork and in what shape or form it was and stuff like this. But it was very hands-on paperwork. From an accounting perspective, technology has changed phenomenally. I remember when I was, 20 years of age or so, I worked for a company, relatively large company. They spent $30,000, which at the time was half of a house, probably. That's the value of half of. You could buy a fairly decent house for $60,000, and they spent $30,000 on a computer that had a floppy disk. Those, and it's real floppy. They don't even know what floppy is nowadays. But a floppy disk, what were they, 8 or 9 inches? And they were really. How many megs was that?
5 1/4
Those are the small ones, and they were.
No, that's a little bit.
That was middle.
That was the middle
size.
Yeah. 3.5 inch was small.
Oh, 3.5.
Yeah.
Then 5. Oh, yeah, but no, these guys had the big ones. Where they were about 8 or 9 inches is an old Wang computer, believe it or not, and I don't even think they're around anymore. Wang, but anyway, but yeah, what was the 6-inch one then, or 5?
1 megabyte.
1 megabyte.
And so now keep in mind, if you take a picture with your phone, it would take about 4 or 5 of those to store one picture.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Some of the technology leap or whatever is just phenomenal. So they spent, when I was 20 years of age, they spent $30,000 on a computer. When I started the accounting firm, and this would be in late 1990s, early 2000s, I was spending between $3,000 and $5,000 to have a workstation. Today, we spend probably $500 to $700 for a workstation. The price has dramatically dropped. It's just and not just dropped, but also increased in their capacity. It's hardly even comparable anymore. It's just ridiculous how the value has changed in that. And it's a little bit astounding because it used to be a huge capital investment for us. And now it's just a few $100s here, a few $100 there. Hardly even affects anything. We barely have to even put anything into a budget for
and we get a lot more now for that cost, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if it used to be $3,000, I mean that was for one screen, and now everyone has two. Everything's wireless.
It's amazing. There's another thing too. I remember when we first started, when you first started here, we had copper lines for phones, and the phone system that we had. Well, for every workstation that needed a phone, it was probably about somewhere between $500 and $600 just for outfitting that phone. And then they had to reprogram everything and the whole thing. And I know when you started, how long did it take? Maybe a year or two until we changed everything to voice over IP? Mm-hmm. And we no longer had copper lines for the phones anymore. It's all now through the internet. Well, we used to spend probably, and it was a smaller firm back then, probably 10, 12 grand a year on phone and phone plans and all sorts of stuff. Now it's like a fraction of that. It's hardly even, we don't even monitor the actual expense of it. Maybe the most is your time managing, setting up a new one, because now we can buy a phone that we can use on a workstation for $100.
About 150.
Yeah. And it just plugs into the computer and boom, boom, it's done. There's hardly any, what is it? How long is it to add a workstation to it?
Yeah. Okay. So setting up another phone takes probably about an hour would be my guess. And again, there's no copper lines. You're using the same internet line that your computer is using. So the internet goes into the phone, and then from the phone it goes to the computer. So it's all one line.
Yeah. The ease of that was ridiculous. And the cost factor is now just a fraction of what it was before, and it continues to go down. Like we just negotiated with, we switched one provider to another provider, and our new plan is now what is it? It's a quarter of what the other plan was. So every little while, it just the cost keeps going down, down, down. Now there are corresponding things. Now, obviously, I have to pay for computer. Well, you guys do programming now, but I mean, somebody still has to manage it and stuff like this. But it's not nearly what it used to be to manage stuff. They had huge businesses, 2 or 3 businesses. You used to work for more of the wire guys, eh?
Not phone, but yeah, I did tech support.
So with the phones before, did you have to pay like monthly per phone that you had?
Depends on the plan, but usually we bought it because if you pay monthly, there's usually a contract, and then if there's a contract in extended, it's always better to buy it.
I think we had 4 lines. It was significantly more than we're doing now with VoIP.
The cost factors of technology in an accounting is just huge. Like it just drives down the cost. Now, the other aspect of it, the understanding how to use that technology. People have to understand how to use it. They have to know the phone systems. They have to know the internet aspect. I remember years. You know what the biggest leap probably in technology is when they came in with plug and play. Remember all of the problems we had? You buy a printer and now you had to search around for the floppy, for the drive on it, and try and link up and make sure it works out. And oh my goodness, you had to have a full-time tech guy just keeping everybody going. That's maybe a little bit of my problem with Microsoft, because I slowly learned to disdain Microsoft. growing an accounting firm, accounting in and of itself does not take a whole lot of power to run a computer. A person can never type faster and enter stuff faster than what it can be programmed. So we don't need top-of-the-line computers to do an accounting workstation. We always tended to get the sort of the middle of the road, or maybe a slightly below middle of the road, in order to keep a workstation going for whatever 4 or 5 years or something like that. But realistically, it was what took up a lot of time is getting these, a printer working and stuff like that. The software we generally used back then, probably good 10 years ago, close to 10 years ago, everything Microsoft. You buy this Microsoft product, you put it in, and as we were growing, the biggest problem, in my opinion, was from 2001 to 2007, Windows XP. Windows XP was awesome. It was stable. I liked it. But then they came out with Vista, and then Windows 7. Both of them were, in my opinion, crap. Windows 8, when it came out, was crap too. And it became better after Windows 8.1. But meanwhile, between basically 2007 and 2013, when Windows was crap, so to speak, I didn't buy a new computer with Vista or Windows on it because I wanted everybody to keep working. Otherwise, I remember we tried Vista and it kept crashing and crashing. And we said, forget it, put XP back onto it or so, because then it would work. And I had other accountants laugh at me because I kept on only using Windows XP. Well, it was so bad, like I was so convinced against Vista and Windows 7 Plus, at some point you could not buy a brand new computer with Windows XP on it anymore. And at that point, we still were a growing firm, needed new computers. So I would buy them used online, garage sales, wherever I could find it. If it had Windows XP on it, I would buy the computer. And then that's how I would expand the firm. And I had these other accountants laugh at me. Oh, you're buying computers that are used at a garage sale. What a cheap guy. And I said, listen, it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with what works and what doesn't work. Windows XP works, and the rest of the stuff, the newer stuff, is crap. And I says, how are you doing with your printer? Well, I get it. It goes down all the time. And I says, that's why I do it. And then he starts complaining, and he kept right on complaining. And really, I was right. Windows XP worked, and everything after that, until a little bit after Windows 8.1, I think. That was when it became a little bit more stabilized, where you could actually plug and play and it actually work, and you don't have to worry about all the different, whether it's drivers or what it was. It was much more stable. So there comes a point in time where technology, the new technology, actually, you have to really fully evaluate whether it's actually has any value in it or not. And that's when it comes to technology, not just in accounting, but all over. If it doesn't produce a huge value, a real value, probably just keep whatever you have, and don't upgrade it. This whole thing where you got to get the newest iPhone or the newest Android or stuff like that, that's just marketing and sales, and they just want to generate sales and stuff. You do not need the newest and the shiniest and stuff like that, because half the time the newest and the shiniest are less quality, bring values, got more problems with everything in there.
Well, and the other thing is the newest and the shiniest. That only lasts for 6 months before there's a new newest and shiniest.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. The technology is good, provided it actually works better. And we're getting, I guess, in the cycle of technology, the growth of technology. Remember, you were around in the .com bubble, okay? Prior to 2000, 2001, any company that came out that was an internet company, they were they had an IPO and you made an absolute fortune, and the stock on it would take off, $100 a share, and but they didn't make a single penny, and some of them didn't even get market share. I mean, but it had a .com on it, so it's supposed to be worth something. Well, when that bust in 2000, 2001, .com burst, the investors realize, well, wait a minute, I guess you can overbuy. And what are you overbuy technology, because you know some of this stuff is just all hype, and so it became a little bit more realistic after that. We evaluated, but even right now in technology, new apps that come out, Silicon Valley. We had an employee who actually, through a couple of leaps, ended up in Silicon Valley. He's a son of a good friend of mine, and I actually, on a road trip, I went out to meet him and his soon-to-be wife, who's now his wife, and had dinner with him. And he was in Silicon Valley in the heat of all of the programming and the fever and stuff like that. Some of the programs that got bought out, like people would invest tens of millions of dollars in some of the most ridiculous ideas. And it's just a repeat of .com prior to 2000, 2001. But they were spending, like, there was one, I think it was $50 million where they were tracking the location and volume of your dog's crap. You know, I mean, who would pay $50 million for that? I mean, it was ridiculous. And that was an extreme, ridiculous one. There was another one where this guy was actually working at, and it was a really reputable Silicon Valley startup where the actual thing that they were programming was, let's say you worked at a particular company and you got paid every 2 weeks. And instead of going to these cash, you know, whatever you call those cash advance places or whatever, you would be able to take a draw on your wages through this program. The program was linked to the employer, so the employer had to buy into it, and then what the employee would be able to do, they would actually be able to take out their daily wages into their cash every single day. The employer had to buy in, so there must have been some sort of money that the employer was putting in to support this software company. But the other thing was the employees were asked to donate to this software company. Well, think of it. You have somebody who's not good at financial management at all, living on a day-to-day basis, drawing his cash out, and you want them to donate to you? I mean, who exactly was their audience to donate to? I mean, these guys are not the wealthiest people to donate. The whole premise of it, there was value to some people at it, but the value came to individuals who couldn't manage their money.
Well, and that's just it, right? So it looks like this software idea, it would have customers.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot of customers, a lot of people that might be interested in it, but there's no actual revenue stream. Like, how are they going to make any money off of this?
I don't know. I mentioned this to them when he was out there. He got a little offended, I think, maybe not. But he doesn't work there anymore. I'd like to talk to him maybe afterwards, see what happened with the company. But I know, if I remember right, that company had investors of anywhere from $80 to $120 million. And fabulous people working with her, just like top-notch people working there on some of the most stupidest idea, or not stupidest, but the probability of it gaining any kind of value is slim to none. Like, if the customer isn't wowed by it and really wants, what's the real long-term effect of it? Little to nothing. Now, maybe they can spin that off onto some other program and put two or three together and maybe bring some. But I don't know. Like, some of the investors into software really are not very bright. Just because they have tens of millions of dollars does not mean they're very smart.
Well, they managed to find a problem that they could solve, which was good. But there's just no actual, like, what are they going to do after that? How are they going to sustain themselves?
Yeah. That's why when it comes to software, my ideas is that do it cash. So if I would have to go and borrow millions of dollars and finish everything that we want to design, first of all, I'd have to increase our accounting fees something fierce, and I'd have to compete with a whole bunch of, it would put such fire into it, and it's so risky because if you don't get it just perfect, you end up being, what did Facebook just launch the other day? We were talking about Threads.
Yeah.
Where they had 20 million people sign up initially, or 50 or something like that. And within 7 days,
the user base cut in half already.
Yeah. So software is very temperamental, and either it works or it doesn't work. And I don't want to bring out anything for making your miles count unless it actually works and it brings value to the
and if you're investing, $150 million into something, it either works and you're rich, or it fails and you're done.
Yeah,
like there's no really in between at that point.
Yeah. So software development is bizarre. It's not a bunch of brainiacs and doing everything perfect. You can look at it and say, I would never do 3/4 of the stuff that happens. Now, having said that, if you find something that has huge value, like I always look at Facebook. Facebook, you're connecting people together, and you can share things. And so social media, it really made a huge impact socially for that. Just Facebook. Now there's all sorts of competition to it. Instagram and no, not Instagram, but TikTok and all these other ones. Everybody competes with it. But at the time, Facebook, sure, you can, if you have a good idea and you program it and you get it and it works, and you can make billions of dollars. But it has to make sense. It has to produce value, and it has to have intrinsic value in and of itself. So, yeah, but those shooting stars, to think that every software that a person thinks of, because I know there's going to be drivers who, like yourself, very interested in software and software development, and think, I got this great idea. And it may solve your problem. It may solve a couple people's problem, but is it scalable? Is it actually bringing huge value? That's the real critical question. And before I would spend a huge fortune on it, I'd like to test it in our accounting firm to make sure that it actually brings good value, and then go to the next.
Well, okay, and that's the other thing. You might have this great idea, and it might solve all your problems, but then you release it, and no one else is happy with what it does.
Yeah.
And with the way we're doing it, we have the company ourselves. We can actually test it to see if it's actually going to do what we want it to do,
and whether it's received by the independent operator. And so we develop it and test it ourselves, and we have our own self. Now, the other factor, though, in that is there's two things about developing software with the way we're doing it. Number one, to some degree, well, it is not some degree. It actually is. It's much slower to develop because we're picking and choosing what we're doing, and we only have limited resources to actually do it. But then once we have it and it's operating, then we go to the next project. We have a list of a dozen projects that we switch priorities back and forth. And as we grow this whole infrastructure, it may take sometimes years. Well, we just moved in December of 2022. We moved to an entirely new platform. How long were we working on that platform? And at one point, we had to redo a whole bunch because some languages changed or whatever, too, right? Well, we had to rewrite some things in the new languages.
Oh, yeah. The thing that was earlier than that, but yeah.
Okay, so from the original conception to the time we actually launched it, December 2022, that's probably 3, 4, 5 years?
Can't remember the timeline.
But it was a long, long time, because I remember I maybe it feels more to me because I waited so long for it, but it's realistically it doesn't. You can't launch a huge platform and move everything because you have huge data. Now we went in our accounting firm. We went 2019. We went paperless.
Yeah,
and that was a year before COVID, and so we were ready for it, but we had several different programs working all at the same time, and the like. So there's a lot of things that we do it all in stages and one platform or one thing on top of another, as opposed to, the Silicon Valley is, what, we're going to grab $40 million and throw 40 people at it, and we better have something in 18 or 20 months, And so these guys, they sleep 4 hours, 6 hours a day or whatever, and they program it. That is a very, very different model, and sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't.
And the advantage we have is that we get feedback as we're developing it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you invest your $40 million, well, again, when it's done, you better hope it works. You better hope you did it correctly.
Be a little bit like QuickBooks when it launched. All the errors and the problems they had when QuickBooks first came out. You remember when all the problems that happened with that. It was now they were very good. They walked people through and gave money back and all sorts of things to rectify it or so. But I'm not the other thing about building it like this, it's not really efficient. Like if we sat down, we say, okay, we're going to build this thing completely. Well, right now we have the right platform, but originally we had a different platform in order to do it. And so we would build 3 or 4 things, and then we'd have to start right from scratch and then build it on a different platform. And then does that make sense a little bit?
I mean, there's a few changes, but I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not quite as dramatic or so, but it's not as efficient as doing the whole thing all in one shot, right?
Well, we didn't know what we all needed either. That was probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
That evolved as we.
As the technology came out, we say, hey, we can do this with that then we can do that with this or whatever, and then it built on there. That's a little bit of a problem as you go at the speed of cash. We say, well, we got enough to do this, so then we'll do this.
And the technology changes very quickly.
Yeah, that's right too.
And so what's good today may not be the best technology 10 years down the road or 3 years down the road. The technology can change very rapidly.
Yeah. But languages, like, that was the one thing that it was a 1.5 year setback in my mind. When that one language we were using, we said, you know what, we're going to redo it and do it. And I mean, I talked to other experts in the field, and they said everybody had to do it. Everybody who was doing this over here had to redo it into a different language because it was dropped. As the president, I realized, okay, it wasn't a mistake that we did it. It was that, okay, we're going along because this is what everybody else was doing, and all of a sudden the world took a left, and we go, shoot, I guess in order for us to think 10 years from now, we got to change with them. And so, yeah, we do have.
I think the way to explain it was the buzzword was technical debt, and you keep going down one road, but you're actually incurring debt, technical debt that you eventually have to pay to implement. You want to implement new features, or different things, then you have to pay off that technical debt, and that's kind of where it was at. Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Okay. Well, I think we're going to take a little bit of a break right now, and then we're going to pick it up and get a little bit more into some of the accounting and tech stuff. So if you enjoyed this, maybe wait for the next program that's coming along, and we will we'll continue this conversation as where the technology is leading the entire independent operator industry, and how it's going to affect you as an independent operator, as a driver, and where's your how can you foresee you're going to be doing everything from your taxes to managing your truck, and what's it going to look like say 5 or 10 years from now. Have a good trip.
Thanks for stopping by Making Your Miles Count. For further Making Your Miles Count productions, call us at 877-987-9787 or download us at makingyourmilescount.com.